Okay, everyone. Well, welcome back to the Decentralized Consciousness podcast. Today on the podcast, I have Soul Luckman and my friend Nozomi Ayase. She, who has been on the podcast a couple of times now, she recommended that I reach out to you. And I've done a little bit, like I was saying before we started recording. I try to do as minimal research to kind of release all expectations before we get in, when we get into the podcast. But I did listen to a couple of podcasts. One was the Higher Side Chats. That was super interesting. And I can't remember the name of the other one at the moment, but the work that you do is incredibly interesting. And I'm super excited to get into the podcast today. So, Soul, how are you?
I'm good. I'm coming back into orbit, Caleb. Thanks for having me on. I wanted you to know that Caleb is one of my on my short list for character names in a future book.
Oh, cool.
I really like that name, so
Thank you.
good on you, mate.
Thank you. Yeah. Good on my folks, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
So, and where'd your name come from, by the way, Soul?
Just God given.
Awesome. So I think where I wanted to start today, um, let's start by going in with let's start by going in with learning a little bit about your spiritual journey from childhood to kind of where you ended up, how you ended up to where you are now.
Oh man, that's a question, isn't it?
Yeah, right. To be half
Yeah.
the podcast.
Hey, you want to go in reverse direction?
Yeah, we could do that too.
Yeah. Really, where I am right now is into the concept of inner alchemy. And I see that as a kind of directing force or end game to the human experience and a real transformation into some other kind of experience, which is not exactly human, or it's maybe human plus. And I don't mean transhumanism or anything like that. I mean, I'm finding that it's possible to take one's consciousness into territories um, where the rules of the game change if you look at this realm that we're in as some kind of game. And this is very exciting. I guess for some people it could be disturbing or frightening that we're, capable of doing this sort of thing. But for me, it's very exciting and it feels like my path with heart, if you're familiar with that terminology.
No, I can't say I am. Path with heart.
It's a Castaneda concept. Carlos Castaneda's books address the subject of
Uh-huh.
path with heart. It's
Mhm.
something that his teacher Don Juan explains to him.
I've read the
Basically,
first book in that series, and it blew my mind. It was so interesting.
so yeah, I think there are 12 books in total, and I mean, there's a lot of embellishment. There's a lot of controversy around the books, which I think is fascinating and wonderful in many ways, because it really gets people to pay attention to them because there's just a tremendous amount of food for thought. And one way of describing the psychonautic consciousness development that you go into in those books is that they're doing shamanism, but you could also describe it as a kind of inner alchemy where you're gathering power or energy and storing it in your body, and then you're using that power to change your life, change what we consider reality, and even beyond that into quite unexplored territory. So I brought up the
Yeah.
path with heart because in later books in the series, I forget in which book this concept is introduced, but the path with heart is explained as what a spiritual warrior must ultimately connect with. It's a personalized thing. It's the thing that really, gets you to follow your bliss, and you follow your bliss all the way to enlightenment and beyond, in essence.
Yeah, very cool. And what did you call it again? It was the
Inner alchemy.
inner alchemy.
Yeah. Alchemy is this very old subject, and it's been written about and talked about, you know, in so many contexts, including in fiction, in addition to alchemical works. And generally, people think it's about creating a philosopher's stone, a sorcerer's stone, like in the Harry Potter movies,
Right.
something that can give you longevity or immortality. And it's also it's in this way of looking at alchemy, it's assumed that it's some external process. It's a kind of chemistry that you're doing, or a kind of pre-chemistry that results in the transformation of lead into gold. And my my understanding of alchemy is that all of that is pure metaphor for an internal spiritual and physical process in your own mind and body.
So then what are we changing with internal alchemy? Because in with the metaphor of alchemy as we know it, we're taking an existing something, an existing metal, and we're turning it into gold. So what is the thing that's being transformed?
Well, it is the consciousness, it is the body in many ways, and it is one's identity that's also being transformed. You can see elements
Mhm.
of this thought process in many different traditions around the world that speak of like a light body that you see in some Eastern teachings, or a rainbow body, or a lighting the fire from within in the Toltec tradition, where you actually go through some kind of transformation that in the final goal is actually to leave this world when you're ready to go through a conscious dying process. You even see this in the natural light practices in Tibetan Buddhism. You actually consciously die, but you don't die. Your consciousness continues, and what enables that process to happen in the inner alchemy tradition, I could turn people on to the books of John Kreiter, Kreiter, really fascinating books on inner alchemy. But the concept here is that you end up gathering enough power into your the seat of your will in shamanism, which is basically the center of your body, kind of behind the belly button. In men and women, it's actually the uterus. And you do transform that power into something that begins to take on something resembling physicality, perhaps holographic at the beginning. And that is the Philosopher's Stone. What's fascinating about this is that it is your etheric double that you are recouping from all of the experiences you've had, and all the places where you've bled out your energy through trauma and other experiences. So one of the key points is to actually heal your past, present, and future selves simultaneously, so that you pull all of that energy back in, and it allows for this transformation that I've been talking about.
So is this like would you consider it to be the same place as like the navel chakra?
It can vary from person to person.
Hmm.
Some people it's a little higher, and of course it would also be into the body, so it's not on the surface of the skin, it's more at the center of the body. You can start by just taking tape measure and measuring your body and going to the halfway point in all three, depth, width, height, and that will give you an idea of where this is in you. And then using a kind of intuitive inner sense, as you begin doing some of the visualization work and other energetic exercises involved in alchemy, you can actually get a clear picture of where it is for you personally.
Interesting. So then would you consider it a different system than the chakras?
Yes, I
Mhm.
would. I've written about the chakras and their number and their placement and various uh, controversies and discrepancies in that model. And so it may not be the most helpful to talk about it in terms of chakras because, there's a lot of controversy over them. But I would say for if you want to visualize kind of where it is and what's going on with it, you could talk about the third chakra as being that kind of seat of the will and the power, kind of a transition between the higher and the lower planes of your being. So it's a very important fulcrum for all of your activities, physical, energetic, spiritual, consciousness-based, whatever.
So yeah, that's crazy. So how have you gotten to this point through your career? I'm sure you've tried out all different kinds of modalities, and like you just said, you've written about chakras, and so what brought you to this?
I I've been on this path for a really long time. My life drastically changed when I was in graduate school in my 20s. I had certain medical interventions for travel, and I won't mention what those were. People can surmise. And I got deathly uh, sick and went into a kind of autoimmune spiral and thought I was dying and spent the better part of a decade trying to get well, get over my crazy allergies and 30 plus symptoms. And what I really stumbled upon in that process was the reality of consciousness and energy and how the mind and can actually change reality by attention and focus and feeling, and how we can interface with our own genetic apparatus. We can actually use energy, thought, and sound to interface with our genetics in such a way as to modify our energy, to upgrade it, and to heal ourselves. So these are the basic rudiments of what became the regenetics method, which is what I developed, and I've written a couple of books on it. And from there, I've just continued to explore, and I've been kind of creating a map, at least in my mind and in some of my writing, between this regenetics work, which also has a lot to do with the center point in the body that, you might call it the crucible or the cauldron or whatever. I've called it the fragmentary body because it's very unhealed in most people, and it's not as energetically powerful by any means as it should be because it's being drained by other forces. So I've been fascinated by this point, and when you get into the alchemical work of somebody like John Kreider, and he's basically talking about it, that's fascinating. That's really, really fascinating. He's coming at it from a very different angle in some ways, but we're also both looking at how all of this relates to energy and power. When I say power, I mean personal power, uh, personal ability to affect change in yourself and around you. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, it did. Yeah, it's quite amazing. My journey has also led me to become interested in various tool sets that are out there from and I haven't necessarily tried them all. The one that I try consistently and I do consistently is meditate. But there are, you know, sound healings, there are psychedelics, there are like um, quantum healing sessions. There's so many, it seems like an infinite array of these different healing modalities. And in one of the podcasts that I listened to, you were outlining these sound healings. Are you still doing that is that still like the kind of the primary tool that you use for this regenerative? work that you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. That's the regenetics method.
Cool.
And it starts with a specific sound healing called potentiation. And it goes from there. There's four activations that occur on a specific timeline over a period of quite a few months. And they're done usually at a distance. We work with people remotely all over the world. I think I want to say we've been in well over 100 countries at this point in time. And yeah, it's definitely the focus of my work and the starting point for the healing and transformational process that we help people kind of walk through. There's a naturopath who is a facilitator of this work, and she wrote an article some years ago. Her name is Julie Two Moon, and she was making the point that she thought it should be the starting point for every healing process because it makes everything better. It makes everything stronger. Other modalities get better from this because it increases your available energy. And without energy, you really can't do anything. And I don't just mean mitochondrial bioenergy, that kind of physiological energy. I mean subtle energy, kundalini, chi, prana, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, there's something with the ability of the human body to make a vibration because that's what we are. We're just vibrating light, and our voices are one method to do this. And you had mentioned in the podcast that I listened to, you mentioned basically it's the vowels. It's a, ah, e, ah, o. And then I thought more about that and the sounds that we make as we're speaking. And the way that we speak, if you really analyze it, which is so interesting, is all of our sentences are essentially a bunch of vowels, and then what we do with our mouth is we constrict them as they come out. So
I like that.
so it's like everything you're saying is a vowel, but you're pinching your lips together or you're moving your tongue to make, the t or the p sound. Yeah, so everything that we're doing is based around this tool that our bodies have to make a vowel sound. It's super fascinating.
Yeah, that's really interesting the way you explained that. That's helpful to me. It's a wonderful way of understanding it. It gets into a different area of my work, which is looking at the structure of the world. What is the world? What is this reality? Who's in charge? What's going on here? Why is there so much chaos? Why are there so many glitches in the matrix and that kind of thing? And I wrote a book about this last year called The World, Cult, and You: Your Place in It and Your Way Out of It. And that's available on my Substack. It's an exclusive book on my Substack. It's also an audiobook. The
Very cool.
the central premise of this is that the world is a gigantic cult. And the way I'm defining it, or a series of subcults inside a master cult. And the way I define cult is you can even have a cult of, theoretically, a cult of one, just yourself and your alter ego, but certainly two people. And it's any relationship dynamic where power is extracted from you.
Wow,
So
yeah,
you
I like that.
talk
Hmm.
about decentralization. Okay, so decentralization is a kind of antidote to this type of centralization of power. And I'm not talking about politics here. I'm talking about some kind of consciousness, a being, an entity that is at the top of the pyramid and is sucking all of this human power, which you could call loosh. That's one word for it, but it's basically
Hmm.
trauma activated bioenergy that you give up through your emotions and your pain. When you do that, you send that right up the food chain. And the Gnostics called the being up there, called it the demiurge. It's also called the Lord Archon. I I I have the Lord Archon as a character in my novel, Kali the Destroyer, which is a Gnostic novel. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about this kind of thing. I call this being the great parasite. And the great parasite is basically feeding on all of this human energy, and the human world is constructed in such a way as to create a kind of precarious balance that's always in the process of imbalancing itself. So that's why there will never be political solutions or that kind of thing. It's not built to do that. It's built to constantly keep people on edge and off balance so that they can be properly harvested, their energy.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. Um, the one of the common themes that comes up in spiritual circles is oneness versus separation. And it seems like definitions are always changing, especially when you explore these things deep in meditation and deep in thought. But my models of understanding what separation is right now, I basically see separation as service to the self or service to some identity which we believe to be the self,
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
true
well,
self. Sorry.
I said, well put.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, so it's like the identity is this thing which is not fully connected or not fully true. The soul that we're trying to basically alchemize our body to become an embodiment of a physical embodiment of. That is what would be representative of oneness and lives within oneness. And yeah, to consider that there is some kind of being, whether it be something that we see as separate from us, some kind of power that is outside of us, or it could be something that humanity, or let's say this group of souls collectively said, "Hey, let's create this, uh, I guess, enemy, if you will, who is going to leech off of us, and we'll just play this out. Let's just play out this game and see how it turns out. And with our own free will, we are going to consciously decide to alchemize. We're going to consciously choose to connect back into oneness and to stop giving our power to this other thing that continues to leech off of us, this false identity."
Oh yeah, I like all of that. Let me try to connect the dots a little bit. So
Hmm.
the idea here is that there is a force, either it's an alien force or it's something that humanity created, okay? And in the first case, it's kind of a predatorial force, and it's sort of you could see it as evil, and maybe it's Satan or it's the Old Testament God or whatever it is. The second scenario is where it's kind of a teacher, and I write about this exact duality, if you will, in The World, Cult, and You. And I ultimately feel like some aspect of us, on some level, was responsible or involved in bringing this thing into this construct, and so that we could wake up, basically, so that it could push enough of our buttons that we would eventually wake up. So that's the classrooms, that's the schoolroom idea. John Keats, the great English poet, he called this the veil of soul making. And so here we are in the crucible of life, trying to transform. And so this is actually pushing us in a kind of alchemizing direction where we stop being fed on energetically by this thing, this consciousness, and we begin to feed on it. Basically, we begin taking back our energy, and so we become, predators in a sense, but in a good sense, in the sense that we're a healthy animal and we're doing what we should be doing, which is taking care of our energy and fortifying ourselves in a way that doesn't hurt anybody else.
Yeah, there's something about the story of some enemy being the yeah, some enemy outside of ourselves being the bad guy that we have to defeat. Um, it's like we,
I see all these truthers getting lost. I feel like they just spend all their time chasing, chasing the
right?
boogeyman, and they don't look inside. I keep saying the only way out is in. The enemy is within. The opponent is you. This is shadow work that we're supposed to be doing, not finger pointing.
Yeah. So how's your personal alchemy journey been going? What have you been discovering? Do you have any crazy insights with, beings outside of yourself, whether it be extraterrestrials or angels? Because it's what's crazy to me that I never would have thought going into this spiritual journey is that all of this is related and all of it's real. I mean, it just blows my mind that all of this is comes from just letting go of our fears, doing the shadow work, and then all of a sudden the just the most I would say what they seem ridiculous. They just don't to the old in the old paradigm, they seem ridiculous, but it's crazy. Yeah, so how has all of your work personally been going?
Gosh, yeah. I'd love to come back to that. I feel like I need to finish my thought about the way this construct works. It might
Hmm.
help me answer that. It's a great question and it's loaded. So let me do my best to just wrap this up as quickly as possible. In the construct, then we create using our attention. Our will is a force of creation. It is how we bring about new scenarios, new developments, new projects, how we accomplish things. And this works across the board, and we're doing it whether we realize it or not, because we're always creating just through the force of our attention. So you can choose to create unconsciously, or you can become conscious of the ways that you're creating and direct that in a very specific way. So obviously, a lot of the inner alchemy work and a lot of the energetic work that I've been doing for a long time is about helping people become more conscious of how their energy is flowing and how their attention is flowing, so they can become better creators at all levels. We tend to create through not just our thoughts, but through our verbalization, through our language. This is a huge key. And my model is that initial language, whatever created the substrate for this perhaps fake construct that we're living in, the pure basis for this, if there was such a thing, this is sort of the Garden of Eden scenario where it was created with language. That's how, in the beginning was the word, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Yeah.
And it was created by using not just any language, but vowels. And it created a sacred space. But then into that garden, a snake, a serpent came. And this is the Lord Archon, the great parasite. And the serpent used, was sibilant and was using a kind of soft vowel, and that was the introduction of the seeds of duality that have imprinted themselves in language as we adopted consonants into the language, and it shrank not just the way we speak and move our mouths, to your point, but also the way we think and see the world. We can't see it
Interesting.
in an open-minded way because we have been changed in how we can see it. We've literally adopted the perspective of the serpent, if you will, of the archon, because it's given us its mind and its method of communicating, its linguistic method of programming ourselves neurologically.
That's yeah, so I was just gonna jump in quick. So yeah, that makes so much sense because I love to use the example of just being in nature and paying attention to how your mind labels everything that you see. You see a tree, you see a leaf, you see the dirt, you see the grass, you see a flower. But in the story that you just told, so that the word itself being the identity, being the limitation. So when I say the word flower, the essence of what I am saying is the word flower. There are things which it is, there are things which it is not. It has a very clear definition. But if we were using the old language, every single flower might have its own vibration. Every single flower might have its own sound. And so being able to tune into every distinct individual piece of our reality and be able to speak to it, like every one flower might sound like oh, and then another one would be like yeah, the right next to it. But they're still flowers. They have similar vibrations, similar sounds, but I'm not restricting it by this generalization of a single word.
Yes, absolutely. The alchemists called this original language, the vowel-based language, the green language. It's also been called the language of the birds. It's very powerful, and that is
Mhm.
the basis for the regenetics method. It's essentially a very specific healing application of the green language.
So I had asked how your personal inner alchemy journey was going, and if you had some especially interesting experiences with some of these beings of higher density.
Yeah, that's a really good question. At the beginning of, or towards the beginning of my whole regenetics journey, when my partner Lee and I journeyed down to Brazil to go in search of the regenetics codes, as it were, we had quite an amazing experience where we literally saw beings of light from a beach and in
Wow.
where we were staying. And I've had a variety of really, really non-drug induced, but nevertheless quite trippy experiences, over the years having to do with energy and also just bizarre, wild serendipities, just the things that just go on and on and on. So that's some of my background. What I've experienced doing my inner work for the last over a year, doing a different kind of inner work, having to do with a kind of recapitulation, a shamanic calling back of one's energy, has been less of that, less of the fireworks, the bells and whistles, and has been more an internal sense of reconnecting with aspects of myself that maybe I thought were gone or were damaged beyond recall, parts of my psyche. And I've also had a real gathering of just personal energy. I mean, I've always been very energetic and, uh, had the ability to exercise and that kind of thing ever since I got well. But I'm talking about just a core strength that I feel at an energetic level, maybe you would even say a spiritual level. That's a kind of funny word, but just something that's not just related to my physical stamina or my mental capacity, something that's more of a gathering of force in the center of my body. I can really feel that process, and I feel like I can go deeper into it. And when I do some of the projectionist techniques where you're projecting into other realities and other domains, which is more along the lines of what you're talking about. While I can't say that I've met beings, I've been able to visualize a kind of lucid dream scenario while being awake. This would be kind of dreaming awake. I've been able to do that with much greater clarity and for longer periods of time. One of the things you're working on in doing this kind of personal fortification is learning to apply your attention more strongly and more consistently and for longer periods of time. So I've seen that as a result. That's been very positive. And I don't know where all of that's going to go. I'm not out there looking for necessarily, I'm not looking to encounter inorganic dream beings necessarily. But, I want to be prepared if I do. And in fact, there's a whole process that you can go through to prepare yourself to meet these beings that Castaneda called allies, because it can be very, very weird to encounter other forms of intelligence out there in the ethers.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like you've kind of hit on this earlier, speaking about identities and these these abilities for people to experience life in a very multi-dimensional way. So being able to see light beings or communicate with angels or guides, this is something that really, really intrigues me, and I'm very excited to be able to do someday. Um, and I've always wondered, what is it about me that, I haven't been able to do this? And I think part of what is happening for me is I continue to identify with a version of me that uh, wants to be very grounded, wants to be very rational. And so when I identify with that perspective, if something like in a meditation comes in that uh, that seems out of the ordinary, or yeah, there's always like this identity is always coming back in and giving some kind of rational explanation for what's happening. It's like, oh, okay, you're you heard that from because there's something psychologically that's causing this belief to happen, or because you have XYZ pattern. And so for me personally, I'm trying to figure out. It's funny because it's kind of an oxymoron, but I'm trying to figure out how to surrender that aspect of myself so that I can become more open to these abilities. And because I know that they're a thing. It's so strange. I don't know how to explain it, but I know that we are infinitely powerful. I'm very confident in that. I have that belief. However, when it comes to actually feeling that energetically or emotionally, that's something that I'm still figuring out how to integrate.
Yeah, that's you're really hitting the nail on the head where a lot of people, I think, experience difficulty in this, especially in this Western world, this highly rational world. The shamans call this place that we're stuck. They call it the place of reason. And reason's not a good word in that understanding of the world, because it implies a tiny perceptual apparatus that gets really good at magnifying a very small visual field, and it misses the whole universe around it. So expanding that perception is a big deal. But here's something kind of funny. I think that there are techniques in this alchemical tradition, for example, that actually play to someone like yourself. It would play to your strengths, where you could utilize your ability to utilize your mind very powerfully to work on focusing attention. Let me give you an example. In, I think it's John Blofield's book on tantric mysticism, he talks about this process where these practitioners in the East were doing something called deity visualization. The idea here is that you're creating kind of a servitor. You're creating a helper, a familiar, or something like that, through the sustained, prolonged, very powerful focus of your attention to create that thing. And slowly but surely, these people would actually create things that other people could see.
Wow.
This type of thing is, you could call it an egregore, you could call it a tulpa, a servitor, whatever you call it. It raises some very sticky epistemological and ontological questions, like angels, for example. Do they exist, or do you create them through your powerful belief in them? The shamanic, um, the alchemical view that attention is always creating. I wrote years ago, consciousness creates, period. That's really the formula. Consciousness creates. This perspective has it that you can't really separate out anything you're perceiving from what you're actually creating.
Oh, wow. And we get so mixed up in it too. And you used the term awake earlier, and it seems like more people are becoming aware of the fact that, yeah, that what we are perceiving is a creation. And I think this is the basis, the very, very basis of our shadow work, is the more that we can understand this, there isn't a difference between what we are perceiving and what we are creating. We are completely accountable. I mean, we're completely accountable, and therefore, if we are completely accountable, we are completely sovereign on the deepest level. It's easy to forget, don't get me wrong. It's easy to slip back into sleep. But I think once you begin down this path of waking up, whatever brought you here, be it curiosity, be it, the inklings of more self-love and a better life, you're just going to keep coming back and going to keep exercising that muscle. And I think that's a lot of what it is. I think that it's a spiritual muscle, and before long, it kind of becomes second nature as you exercise it more and more.
I like that a lot. Yeah, the attention really is a kind of muscle, and you
Hmm.
use it to do really extraordinary things. I mean, one of the things that you can do alchemically, for example, is you can use your cauldron, your crucible, your fragmentary body, which can be transformed through regenetics into a very powerful center of energy. You can use that and certain visualizations and even breathing techniques to pull energy from, let's say, an argument. Like you're having an argument, right? And things are escalating, and you're both parties in the argument. Their energy is being extracted, and it's being fed upon ultimately by the great parasite. It's going all the way up the food chain. And that's the purpose of so many conflicts, is to just generate food for this entity. The funny thing is that if you can bring your attention to what's going on, if you can see it with any level of clarity, and begin to engage certain ways of breathing and visualizing the energy flow, you can pull back your energy and the energy of the whole situation and put it right back in your cauldron. And usually, if you can do that, the argument will just peter out. It has no energy left in it, and you're not even participating anymore. And you've gained a tremendous amount of energy because you can ultimately start feeding up the food chain and drawing energy from the great parasite. And you pull it in kind of to your stomach, which is a physical digestive organ, but it's also an energy digestion system. And in that position, you use a kind of intention to make it your own energy and to purify it so that it has no taint of anything that's not you or shouldn't be in you. And then you can store it down in your crucible and you pack it in and you work on creating your philosopher's stone.
Yeah, though what comes up for me is you could almost look at it like your etheric body has installed some kind of program. Or if you look at the parasite, if you envision like this parasite, it's got, millions and billions and gazillions of tentacles into each of our energy bodies, and so it continues to separate us from our souls. What you're kind of doing is removing those tentacles from your field so that your energy is no longer flowing out, no longer being so distorted anymore. And then you can see it for unconditional love once again, creation energy once again.
Yeah, just kind of raw energy.
Mhm.
And you're so right. You are pulling out those threads, those entanglements, those connections, those splinters in your wounds, however you want to look at it. And as you do that, there comes a point, and I'm not saying that I'm there, but I believe in this point. I've heard enough people talk about it in different ways to really feel strongly that it's a part of the journey. When you get to a certain point of extracting all of those energetic compromises, the great parasite suddenly just leaves you alone. You're no longer on the menu. And here's the catch. It's devastating when this happens. This is potentially a dark night of the soul for some
Yeah,
people.
that's what I was
Because
going to say. Yeah.
for the first time in your existence, you are utterly alone in your thoughts. That voice in your head that you think is you, but it's really not, it's gone.
So did you ever notice if there was a mix between the voice of the higher self and the voice of the parasite, and it was hard to discern between the two?
Yes, I think that's very common. Absolutely. You
Yeah.
you can follow a bit of a common sense guide in figuring out what's the parasite and what's you trying to contact you, you know. Uh Obviously things that are good for you, that empower you, that give you bliss, joy, meaning. These are messages from the higher self, and things that undermine you and cause doubt and fear and paranoia, etc. Obviously these are extensions of the archontic mind. Having said that, the I believe that this force is super creative, and if you get to a point where you're following some formula, I believe it can change its tactics and it can masquerade as the higher self. So it gets very, very tricky at some points. That's when you get to these strange forks in the road, and it's very, very difficult to determine what the right thing is.
Yeah, that fits well with my models for understanding too. If we, I'm sure you're familiar with Eckhart Tolle, and he speaks a lot about the ego. And if we look at it from his perspective, where we build all of these egos and identities for interacting in the three-dimensional world, as we work our way up the spiritual evolutionary ladder, we begin to identify as someone who is more spiritual, someone who is more well connected, I guess, to their highest self than they used to be. And even in those identities, we can still get wrapped up in a lot of dramas. We can still get wrapped up in pushing away things that we should be working on, and resisting things that we should be working on, or even judging other people for not not doing what we think that that they should do. Uh, you know, I always say, or not always say, I just kind of recently discovered that the reason the reason that I judge other people is because I'm judging those aspects in myself. So,
Bingo.
right. So it's like, because I have to have something to contrast to. Otherwise, there's no point in keeping this identity. And so when the identity is being challenged, it has to reaffirm itself. The ego is like reaffirming itself by comparing itself to other people. And I think that even these, again, if we're going like the Eckhart Tolle model of egos, these higher version egos, they still want to judge, and it can be tough. Like you said, you can still get wrapped up in there, and it can really masquerade as someone or as the highest self, but it's still a lower version that's ready to get released too.
You're so right. It's why in the world of cult and you, I essentially make the argument that in order to decultify yourself and become an individual through a process of individuation, you have to spend a lot of time alone. And, you're not going to find a tribe that's going to help you do this because the tribe is going to have a version of you that you have to live up to. And, this is very challenging. I'm not saying that community is impossible. I'm saying it's damn hard to make that work in this world.
Yeah, there are a lot of people in the decentralized consciousness community who are doing this shadow work for themselves, and they're very much interested in helping other people do it as well. And I'm really curious from your perspective. You seem like someone who has seen a fair amount of success in the work that you do. How did you what was that journey like to building this business? And what were some of the big hurdles for you to overcome? How did you overcome them? Um, you know, I- and to give you some more context, like with we have a small group of men in the decentralized consciousness group who are what we call session facilitators. And basically what we do is our objective is to have a one-on-one, it can be virtual. In fact, I don't there's very few of us who have done physical sessions yet. It can be virtual one-on-one sessions where we do our best to just meet the participant with as much neutrality as humanly possible. So being able to view everything that they say, all of their struggles, all of their fears, all of their joys, all of their vices, whatever, with complete neutrality. And in doing so, the conversations that we have, or the some of us have unlocked abilities to do light language, for instance. So I've been working with some light language as myself, and it's been super powerful. But for us in this group, we have been working mainly with each other, and we've been wondering, it's like, gosh, we're offering such amazing stuff here. It really is incredible how much we've been able to help one another. And we really would love to be able to do this for other people, to be able to support our families by doing this for other people. I mean, what better what better way to support the world and support humanity by these soul to soul connections and helping people heal themselves. I mean, it's just, but for some reason, we it's just not happening yet. So did you have you experienced in the past, have you experienced anything similar, and what was it like for you getting through those initial stages?
Yeah, that's it's a really good question. I mean, it speaks to the nuts and bolts of how to do this kind of thing in the world. I mean, when Lee and I went to Brazil, I thought I could be dying, and we had we had been given some money by someone who was wanting to support us. It was a very generous gift, came out of the blue, someone who had experienced some of our other energetic work leading up to regenetics. And then we went to Brazil and we had a series of kind of mystical experiences. We got these sound codes through. We performed them on ourselves. We both started healing from all kinds of different things, and it was kind of miraculous, transformative, very intense at times. And we had no money left over. Our resources were running out, and we didn't know what to do. And we just started doing some. We started offering distance potentiation sessions with some people doing sort of a trial run, and some of them paid us a little bit of money and that kind of thing, but it wasn't a lot. And we didn't really know what we were doing. We were also pregnant at the end of that experience in Brazil, and that put added pressure on us to figure it out, and so we did have a couple of pretty lean years when we were very young parents and trying to figure out how to move this forward. So I'm not going to say it was given to us by any means. The most important thing that I did to move things forward was I wrote a book called Conscious Healing that ended up being translated into was translated into a couple languages, Turkish and German, and then some weird stuff happened with the German translation and it never appeared. So anyway, that book was pretty popular and still popular, actually. People still read it. It's a, a very in-depth look at many of the topics we've been discussing today, having to do with energy and genetics and transformation, consciousness, that kind of thing. So I did that. That was that was back in '05, I think, when I published that. And then a few years later, I wrote Potentiate Your DNA, which was the follow-up to that. And that was the how-to guide, like teaching you how to do this for yourself, the potentiation activation. And that's been very popular. And that's now in Spanish, and the audiobook is on the way, and the French edition is on the way. So that's pretty cool. But really, the whole marketing game has changed a lot. You probably heard of the death of SEO, and that's real. And people aren't finding me organically the way they used to on Amazon. They're gaming that whole system. And so I'm in the process of thinking about some new strategies for getting my books out there to a wider audience once again. And I don't want to talk about what those are because I haven't tried them, and I don't want to send people down a yellow brick road with those. But I do have some good leads. And if we ever have another conversation and I've had any success with that, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Substack has been, I'm at saulluckman.substack.com. That's been good for me. It hasn't grown as much as I would like for it to, but it has offered some financial support. I have a lot of free content, but then I have a paywall behind which I have practically all of my books and audiobooks and tutorials and other materials related to regenetics, related to the world, cult and you, as well as my fiction books. So that's a place where I try to bring in lots of good articles, information on many related topics. I posted an article just the other day on a study about how the emotions are actually mapped onto the body, giving people more food for thought about this way of looking at the body as a kind of energy system, that you can actually measure things energetically and measure these emotions taking place. Very, very fascinating stuff. But I don't have any shortcuts about this kind of thing. I feel like I've made a joke before that I must have antibodies to going viral. If you get the joke, because I've just never been able to have a single thing I've ever done, I don't care how good it is, go viral.
Right.
And it just lets, okay, either they're not as good as I think they are, or something else is going on. There's this great parasite that probably doesn't want me doing what I'm doing. I mean, maybe that's a narcissistic way of looking at it, but I've felt so much resistance at times that it's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's certainly discouraging sometimes to think about the algorithms that are out there. And yeah, there are a lot of people that talk about shadow banning and
Absolutely. I've lived it. I've absolutely lived it. I've been deplatformed. I've had all kinds of things, you know.
that's
Um,
crazy.
so I've had some very, very odd stuff happen, and I've soldiered through. You know, what do? You get up and was it Dwayne Wade who said it's not how many times you get knocked
Right.
down, it's how many times you get back
Yeah,
up. Oh,
exactly.
just get back up, you know.
Right. Yeah, and the way that we as a group, the facilitators, I mean, have sort of been uncovering this is we are, we've kind of decided that we're just going to keep going. It's kind of like what you said. Just keep putting stuff out there and keep following our inner guidance. And
What else are you going to do, really? I mean, if you
mhm,
just look in the mirror and this is something that you're passionate about and you're called to do,
yeah,
what else is there to do? I
hmm
mean, it's
right,
you used free will earlier, and I'm not disagreeing with the concept of free will, but in a world where everything is kind of both and, there's also some predestination going on here where you are just given talents and things that turn you on for who knows what reasons.
yeah,
And when you encounter them, they're stronger than you are because they are some kind of directing morphic force helping guide your life.
yeah, yeah. And I think what we're getting a lot of in return, and probably I don't even it might even be 100% because everything comes from within, right? So I think I think the resistance that we could be getting is all internal. It's internal doubts, it's internal fears. Um, but yeah, and this is where the concept of projections and self-sovereignty from every human being a creator gets kind of confusing. But if we can do our part to clear our side of the projections, um,
Yes.
then hopefully we can allow people some space to clear their own. And I think it seems to me, it feels to me like we are at the beginning of a very big evolution. Me personally, I wasn't really into this deep into spirituality outside of religion. Um, I just was not into this deeply 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and how my world has completely changed, how my lifestyle, my life, it's just completely changed. And I think that it's going to just continue to happen this way exponentially for people across the globe. So for those of us who have been going down this road seemingly early in this process, just remember that we are still early. That's a common saying in Bitcoin too, is we're early and yeah, but just got to keep going.
Right, right. I was going to say that eh, this question of agency is what you were getting at with, where are things being generated from? If people have, through no fault of their own necessarily, but if they've been born into a system where they part of their agency is assigned to the great parasite, and we allow that consciousness to operate through our own minds, then you have sort of two creators going on at the same time. And maybe we created the great parasite, of course, and that's where the serpent bites its tail. That's the big
Right.
Ouroboros, the alpha and the omega there. But that aside, we have to realize that our first responsibility is to take back our agency, which means taking back our mind and our energy from that interaction. And until we do that, we are creating at cross purposes, and we might perceive that as external blockages because, in some ways, they are, because the agency has been displaced from our interiority. As you take the agency back, I think it becomes clearer and clearer that it's all you. There's only one of us here.
Yep, exactly. Yep. The more power that you take back, it's like the more power to see. Yeah, it's the more power to see how much you really are. I want to say in control, but it's not control in the sense that we define it in the like this, like you said, this like Satan's version of the word from the Garden of Eden, this identity. It's control is it's not control, it's power, it's sovereignty, it's authority. It's authority over our own life, over our own world.
Yeah, and most importantly, I would say the ability to author ourselves.
Mm,
To me, when I see the word authority in this type of context, it immediately makes me think that we are writing ourselves into existence on some level.
that's powerful. All right, so well, we are just about out of time. So you had mentioned a few of your books, which is great. You had mentioned a website. Is there anywhere else that I can send people to get in touch with you and the things that you do?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My regenetics site is Phoenix, like the bird, phoenixregenetics.org. So that's a great place to start learning about this energy work. I also have a lot of regenetics resources on my Substack. That's saulluckman.substack.com. I have a Saul Luckman Uncensored YouTube channel. I have Saul Luckman music on Spotify, some really interesting kind of conscious music, conscious indie music, sort of neo shoegaze, new wavy kind of stuff that has
Yeah, very cool.
a little bit of a little bit of a resonance with some of this conversation to it. So please follow my playlist. Come check me out. Do some free streams. That's kind of a fun world. Those are the main places. I mean, I'm on Instagram, Saul Luckman. You can follow me there. I mean, I'm the usual places, Facebook. But in terms of getting down into the energy work, that's phoenixregenetics.org.
And I also contacted you through Crow Rising. Is that a place you want to send people to?
Yeah, that can be part of it. That's my official website, and it maps out into all these other places. That's crowrising.com, or you can just go to saulluckman.com. It's the same thing. They point at the same place. Yeah, I think if you go there, you can get a free copy of my memoir with a lot of my artwork in it. It's called Musings from a Small Island. So you can just click on the link and get a free copy of that. And if
Very
you go
cool.
over to phoenixregenetics.org, you can get a free copy of Conscious Healing. So that's 2 books, 2 freebies.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you've created a lot in this journey, and I look forward to checking out a lot of that stuff, and would love to schedule a session with you too. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, there is just so you know, and so that our listeners know, there's something called Worldwide Potentiation Ceremony. It happens the first Sunday of every month. It's remote, so it's a distance experience, and it's free. You can just sign up and experience potentiation for free.
Awesome. Yeah, I got it wrote down so we'll put all this in the show notes so we everybody can easily find all this stuff. This is sounds really cool. So
Hey, I
uh,
want to just thank you for having me on. This was a really in-depth conversation. I'm kind of shocked that we went into some of this territory, but I'm glad that we did. So thanks for being willing to go there with me.
yeah, me too. It's so fun, and like I said before we started recording, that I'm just satisfying my own curiosity. And funny, I told one of my friends this recently, where it's like I feel like I've been trying to have these deep conversations my whole life, and it's now finally coming to be that I'm able to have them, and I found people that are willing to have them with me, because a lot of people will just be like, no, I don't want to, they just don't want to get that deep. So it's super fun to to be meeting people like you, who I can riff with. So appreciate you.
So I'll leave you with the phrase from my novel Snooze that people use to greet each other in a more conscious version of our reality. You ready for it?
Yeah.
I see myself in you.
Mm. Love that. I see myself in you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Soul, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, you too.
All right. We'll keep in touch.
Right on.
Bye-bye.